Welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully after this hour, you will be freer than where you started. Today, I brought on two of my favorite guests for us to be able to discuss Black History Month, because we are in the middle of it again. Today, we have, of course, every Friday, it's Sharif El Mekki schooling me on all things Black and Black history. And today we brought in big guns, because we have a big topic to school us all. We have Dr. Greg Carr with us today. Good morning, brothers. How you doing?
Glad to be here. Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Glad to be here. Excited that we got Dr. Carr back. You know, often when you hear shows saying, "Oh, we need you to come back," you know, we actually said, "No, we're for real. We need you back." You know?
Usually they don't mean it. So usually, you should come back, and then they never call you back. So
I consider this a command. This table right here, every week, man, y'all just smashing illusions and getting us a little step closer to freedom. So it's an honor to even be asked to come back into this conversation. I'm glad to be with you, both you brothers, man.
Well, it's a perfect timing because I have a problem that I want to run by you brothers to see if you can help me out with it, right? So at least since the past 4 years with Trump, every year in January, I start getting requests. Can you write something for MLK Day? Can you participate in this MLK thing? And I don't know why, don't know where it started, but I started saying no a couple of years ago because I was like, no, I'm not even feeling it right now. I'm sorry. Just, I don't know where it came from. It was like a sickness. And then when it would come to Black History Month, there would be all this activity. What are we going to do for Black History Month? Can you provide me a couple of things? Could you write this? Can you say this and that? This year, when it came around, I was really not feeling it. And I said, I think it might be time to stop Black History Month, to end it. Now, I didn't say this out loud because I didn't want to die. I didn't want people to chase me down and hurt me. So I didn't say this out loud, but to myself, I was like, you know, what would happen if we just sat out and it wasn't our thing? So what I want to present to you is just like a thumbnail sketch of an argument about closing down Black History Month and see what you brothers say. Can I do that real quick?
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's first talk about a quick timeline. Just so
I'm excited and nervous at the same time.
And it's not that profound in a way. So I just want to manage expectations. But here's my quick argument. So 1915, historian Carter G. Woodson and Minister Jesse E. Moreland, they found the Association of Study of Negro Life and History. 1926, they sponsor a Negro History Week as a way of injecting the accomplishments and the contributions of Black people into the larger schema, into the larger society. In the 1960s, because of Black Power activities and and the Civil Rights Movement, it evolves into a month, Black History Month. 1976, it gets the ultimate validation. Gerald Ford officially recognizes it as an official holiday, and he tells all Americans that they should too. Okay, so we get official recognition after 50 years. But now this is where I'm at now. We've had all these years since. So here's my main problems. Black History Month is time-bound and shallow. It's a shallow effort at understanding the complex history of African Americans. It's a trivialization of the strategies and the inventions that African Americans have used to gain their freedom. It's a commercialization of the history that serves corporate interests more than ours, and it blackwashes agendas that work against Black freedom, mostly corporate agendas. I saw in one of the things I watched as a run-up for this show, it was showing Nike and Heineken and Apple and liquor companies and others using Black History Month as a vehicle for their message and mass message. Not like it gets to two people, but it's like mainlining in your main artery, going to the main body politic. This idea that, that our history is used for commercial purposes. And February becomes that opportunity for it to happen. And it's also a ritualized cleansing of our do-nothing, talented 10th leaders who each year confirm their status as representative power people rather than actual power leaders. Now, what I would propose would be a better focus than Black History Month would be a continuation, a 12-month calendar of acquainting ourselves with Nguza Saba principles, a 12-month calendar on the meditations around Amos Wilson's Blueprint for Black Power, a 12-month meditation cycle on Dr. Claude Anderson's Powernomics, things that lead to actual power, not representative or ceremonial or ritualized power. So in a nutshell, my argument is that Black History Month has actually become an agent against a deeper understanding of the strategies that actually free us and a trivialization of the strategies that we actually need. In some ways, it's a version of crack, intellectual crack for our communities. That's it. In a nutshell, that's my whole.
That's all.
That's it. You're like nothing profound. Just this little thumbs. I don't know if that's a thumbnail sketch, but
so there's the sketch, and help me because I actually really want something that is lasting and creates power. But I don't want to get rid of something if I'm wrong about it. I might be wrong. Maybe this is a month where people learn great things. Since I was a child, I seem to remember this being the month where we're told that, that George Washington Carver used the peanut to make malt liquor and everything, right? Like, right. But not to teach me what are the principles for power that would free our community.
Baba, please.
Oh, listen. I mean, it was I hear you. I mean, particularly around the trivialization. And I think in some strands, I agree with you. I've frequently said, Black History Month is every month. February, we're just the blackest. It's just like our launch pad. Just like, Kwanzaa can be a launch pad. This can also be, a launch pad. As far as like the trivialization and the co-opting of it, like we see this, like we know what society does. We know what a capitalistic society does. Like they won't like it. They won't agree, but that's what they'll say in the front end. But in the back end, they're figuring out, all right, how do we make money off of this? How do we use this? And I think that's what you see when you saw those commercials and folks that are like, not supporting Black progress and Black liberation any other day, but now this month they're like, oh yeah, watch this commercial and, buy this while you're at it, so I think you have a lot of just great points on there. And I do think that, Dr. Woodson was more interested in the movement, the mindset, the institution building. And I think he even gave a critique, even back then in the early 1900s, of don't just do a festival, of this week or this month and then forget about it. So it has to be a daily practice. It has to be a life. I mean, to me, Black History Month is a lifestyle. It ain't February. I don't think like, oh, February. It's a lifestyle. And in February, I may add, a little cherry to it, but it got to be an everyday mindset, Doc. What do you think?
I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, I would ask, before I say anything else, let me ask you, Chris, if we had a 12-month agenda, how would you feel about some point or points in the arc of that deliberate 12-month course of study and action and conversation, debate, dialogue, building, a point or points in that calendar where we, so to speak, clusters of we, maybe even a big we, if we could ever get to that imagined land, convened to take an accounting of how we were doing?
Oh, you said accountability. Oh, people don't like that. He said people said accountability. That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, we're an education show, and you bringing up dirty words in an education show like accountability.
I'm listening. Right, these are master teachers. I should have known. That's the first thing that came. So that's what you've been talking about all along. Then, way to measure and hold people to account.
And if in the way you just framed it, then there's a utility to the 1 month. The 1 month isn't a destination, it's a milestone, right? Right. So that for me feels different, right? It's like, so I'd say yes to that.
Okay. Well, I want to echo our brother Baba El-Meki to say that not only do we have a sense of how Carter Woodson envisioned Negro History Week, he did exactly what we just heard you say, Baba. In fact, as far as I can tell, and there may be some correspondence or something to I haven't yet traced the date down to see, but as far as I can tell, this is the last thing that Carter G. Woodson wrote for publication before he died in the house on 9th Street here in DC in April 1950. It was the March 1950 editorial for the Negro History Bulletin, which he started in 1937 in major part as a place for school teachers, administrators, principals, educators, and school children to publish lesson plans, short historical essays, and report outs on how they were learning. The last thing Woodson published was an editorial entitled "No Study and Consequently No Celebration." He said, "It is evident from the numerous calls for orators during Negro History Week that schools and their administrators do not take the study of the Negro seriously enough to use Negro History Week as," and here's the money line, "a short period for demonstrating what the students have learned in their study of the Negro during the whole school year." That's Carter Woodson. Then he goes on to murder who he calls these mischievous orators.
Murder.
In fact, let me let the man speak for himself. He says, "These mischievous orators, as it has been said again and again in these columns, have no message which they can connect with the celebration of Negro History Week about the only thing on the Negro which they know is the traditional discussion of the race problem and how it has been or can be solved. Such orators therefore introduce the undeveloped youth to the problems of strife which in their community they cannot easily understand. Such foreign exercises should give place to simple presentations of those deeds of the Negro which will inspire the youth toward emulating the examples of those who have achieved in spite of tremendous handicaps." Then he goes on. Woodson's whole concept was, we take a small time in February to take account, and it seems to me in this moment, you could extend that very clearly with and make accountable those who are not doing it, the curriculum work that takes place the rest of the year. And what makes me laugh about it is that, and I was looking through the Negro History Bulletins, I had just about all of them. And there was a column that they published in October 1943, just a little, almost like an advertisement in the middle of the little newsletter, the journal. And they say, "Hey, it's October. Negro History Week is coming. Make sure that you're studying and you're doing this work so that we'll have something to celebrate in February." I mean, he's sending out the messages all year, just putting them, hey, what y'all doing? And you see these school children writing. And Bob El-Meki, I think about this, man, because of course the work that I guess we'll be taking up again with these teenagers shortly with Freedom Schools.
Yes, sir. Bring it.
I'm looking through for Philadelphia specific stuff, and I'm seeing these little reports the school children of Philadelphia are writing about the Black people for whom their schools are named. And man, all through the year, I mean, it's come from all over the country, but I'm trying to pull the Philly ones. So I'm like, wow, these young people are writing about, and this is like 1952, 1961, 1942. I mean, it's like, and you see, and I guess what I'm saying is, and I'll end with this, and like, we often rob ourselves of the momentum of our memory. So whether it be the 1619 project, the 1776, all these stuff, as I read through them, and now I guess there's a new book out, 400 Souls, I see, and I just kind of laugh because all this stuff, when you stack it up against what we've done before, it wouldn't even make the cut to be in the stuff we've done before. But when we don't consult our memory, we rob ourselves of the momentum, and we come back to these discussions without knowing we already answered that question. I mean, it's an incredible thing. And I think that's our real dilemma in a moment like this. And I think that's what Woodson was after. How do we get the momentum of our memory to use it to move forward when we just keep starting from ground zero with each generation.
I can't believe it. I mean, that's so powerful that he answered the question for me a long time ago.
Not only I'll say it to you, Sharif, when we did that curriculum for the African American history course in Philly, the adding it to maybe dozen other curriculum written for the schools in Philadelphia on African American subjects that never got used.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Which we know when we wrote it, the first big lesson we wrote out was called Intellectuals of the African Diaspora, Carr G. Woodson and the Origins of African American History Month. And we wrote it as a lesson that could be done over the arc of several 6-week marking periods where you can follow Woodson's journey and his critique and link it to across the curriculum. And of course, but what good is it if we don't use it?
We don't use it.
This to me sounds like what needs to happen more, number one, and it can't be sponsored by Heineken. Right,
no,
like or Johnny Walker Red Label. Zakia, my colleague at Brightbeam, Zakia and I were talking about the Apple Watch. They're selling an Afrocentric commemorative band for your watch. It's red, black, and green. You can buy it right now. And there's a special watch face you could put on your Apple Watch, your $500-$600 watch. It's part of their commitment to Black issues right now, right? $600 is their commitment for you to pay them to commemorate, right? Like your story.
Listen, some of these people, they wear their RBG, but they about as stars and bars as they come, and they look like us. You know what I mean?
That's right.
This is what I think is interesting. So I was looking through different videos about this particular subject as I was preparing for today. And Sharif, I shot you a message about, now what's her name? I'm going to forget. It's like Dungy Glenn.
Yeah, Sandra Dungy Glenn.
Sandra Dungy Glenn. Okay. In Philly, and she was quoted in one of the stories that I was watching was about it's ridiculous to try and fit all of our history into a discrete period of time like February. The real goal is to do what they did in Philly. Philly became the first district in the United States to pass a resolution that made it a requirement for graduation to high school. And she said, now you know it's serious. That's when you know it's serious, because to graduate, for everybody to graduate high school, you have to take Black history, and it can't be some discrete little period. And I thought to myself, now see, that actually resonates with me of what they were trying to do with Negro History Week, was start the interest in it, but make it permanent, make it a permanent fixture of things. And I see other cities just now picking that up. Like just now picking up the idea that they need to make it a permanent part of the curriculum, not some specialized, trivialized, marginalized portion of the school year where they cover these issues. So I would love to know if you all feel that gets us anywhere, or if that's just a ceremonial, if that's just another ceremonial kind of like thing. I thought it was groundbreaking as a former school board member to basically say, no. Just like we study wars and Civil War and Lincoln and everything else as the core part of the curriculum, this is a core part of the curriculum that everybody has to learn, Black and white, as a matter of fact. Everybody has to learn this.
Well, I just want to flag something. Then I'll yield the floor to Dr. Carr, because I'm sure he'll bring up Dr. Robinson and a whole lot of stuff around Philly politics and in this long fight that's not over. But what I would say is, remember when Penny Nixon and Sandra Dungy Glenn, like, she's right, like it should not be captured in a month, right? Like, cause she's, I told you, like, when she was in the school board and things like that, like the efforts that she helped us in many different ways, right? So, but what I would say is that when Dr. Penny Nixon came on our show earlier, your show earlier, as a guest of ours, she mentioned of observing some of these courses, some of these classes, because it's one thing to have the curriculum, a part of it, right? Because it's not the whole thing. This is, we're talking about now what was originally conceptualized has now been, kind of narrowed down to a year in high school. Secondly, she walked around and observed people. After doing professional development, she observed and saw who was leading the classroom, who was teaching the course, right? Because one thing to have a course, it's another thing who's implementing it, right? Like you can have a tool. It's another thing. Is it a master, craftsman using that tool, or is it me? And I'm just clunking around with it, right? And so, what she noticed was what certain people would take out of the curriculum, which was essentially the fundamental reason for it was the objective of the lesson. And they turned it and switched it and said, well, I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm going to switch this up and I'm going to teach what I want to teach. Right. And so even today, you can talk to, Black history teachers who got that freedom fighting vibe. And they will tell you, like, as they go to trainings or professional development or observe classes, that our children are not getting what, was originally conceptualized to have, not even in the year-long effort.
That's exactly right, Baba. You all know that. You know that better than I do. From 1998 to 2000, I worked for the school district of Philadelphia. I was an administrator. I was I was the assistant to Cassandra Jones, who ended up, being the school district superintendent in Baltimore, who at that time was working out of the Office of Education for Employment. That's where we started Freedom Schools in 1999. And my second year, they really didn't have a title for me as such, because what I wanted to do was teach high school and then maybe do community college for a couple of years, then go to university. I mean, K-12, I wanted to do that work. So when I came down to school district and started asking some of my friends in the network, they floated my resume around. They said, well, you got a JD and a PhD. We don't need you in the classroom. I said, no, that's exactly the problem. Y'all trying to make me an administrator. I'm a teacher. I mean, I've taught college, I was great, but I want to go, So anyway, Cassandra, I worked for her. That second year, she said, no, we're going to give you a title, something. So they made me what they call a program specialist on race and culture. And that basically meant I got to do what I wanted to do after I'd done all the administrative stuff I was supposed to. So I went on a tour of many of the high schools, middle schools in Philly, sitting with folks who I'd heard or I knew or heard of through them, this network of master teachers. I knew Aisha Imani at William Penn because I had worked with her because she was doing African American history, and like a lot of teachers, as we know, do guerrilla style at a small learning community down at William Penn called Masterminds. Aisha Imani, who now, of course, runs the Sankofa Freedom Academy, which actually tied to this. Anyway, Ken Hamilton, the former basketball coach at Ben Franklin High School, he was doing the history course, but he had all the dudes. He was the coach, so the guys would be in his room. And I remember I went over one time at Ben Franklin. I'm sitting with him, and he's teaching African American history, and he said, "Come on, back, man. Let's talk some more about my experiences." So he's walking me through decades of Philly education, politics, right? Meanwhile, the young brothers are watching Roots. and what I found was, as you said, Sharif, it varied wherever you went, and that was for the freedom fighters, so to speak. Pause. 2021, those names don't exist in the heads even of our well-intentioned and brilliant young teachers who are in the classrooms now, who have no way to use that living memory archive for momentum. That is what I'm saying, one of the problems. So anyway, fast forward. When finally, after 40 years of struggle, that course became a reality, and Sharif walked you through that because, much of which he was living there, and between him, his mom, the whole generation of African freedom fighters, from the time the young people walked out in 1967 and Frank Rizzo let the cops loose on them down there in front of the school district building. Dave Richardson, who ended up in the state legislature in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, was one of those students. I mean, till 2007, when Sandra Dungy Glenn, my friend Sandra Dungy Glenn, who was on, as you say, the School Reform Commission, because remember they had taken over the Philly Public Schools, the state, that control board in, was one of the chief. In fact, she was the chief advocate on that School Reform Commission to get that passed. She then turned to her friend and our dear friend, sister warrior, Dana King. Dana King had become the head of African American Studies, which used to have its own separate unit in the school district. Dr. Carolyn Holmes ran it for years, and then Dana took it, and then they also gave her social studies, because now they're going to figure out a way probably to phase it out. At one time, Philadelphia had a separate office of Latino studies, Asian American studies, African American studies, all this coming out of the 60s. And this is the struggle. Now, of course, with no institutional memory and folks coming in, we can do it better. And then you just erase stuff. It's all commingled. So anyway, long story short, she tasks Dana with getting a team together to write the curriculum for this new course. Dana turns to me I pull some folk together. We write the curriculum. And this is the curriculum. School District of Philadelphia, African American History course. And what do we name it? Lessons in Africana Studies. Why? Because we're not historians. We're doing Africana Studies, which leads to the thing. Our first challenge was, by the way, that lesson that I was reading from the Woodson, all those documents are in here. So the first thing we said was, the problem with curriculum often isn't getting the right content, is getting students and teachers to ask the right questions, because they had already spent a ton of money on a new textbook called the African American Odyssey or something. Darlene Clark Hine, William Hine, her ex-husband, and one other dude, Harold, Harrold. They had because textbooks, they spending money. And my first thing was, we're not using From Slavery to Freedom. I know John Hope Franklin. I know Elton Brooks Higginbotham. I'm going, hey, Franklin's the man. But no, you start your history with slavery, everything looks like progress. And I know you got them two little vestigial chapters at the beginning on Africa. But let's be clear about this indoctrination. Darlene Clark Hine's book is the same as all the books. Oh, there's a little bit of Africa and then slavery. And here we go. So the problem we had was, and it's a good problem, Dana King is a master teacher. Senator Dungy Glenn said, we want teachers involved. At every time we would draft something, we would workshop it with two groups. Some of those teachers who were already teaching this stuff, and we partnered with the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History. I forget the sister's name. She's an ancestor now, was around for years. She was the president of ASALA in Philly, the Philly branch. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, once we got it done, we then started having, we didn't call them professional developments. From day one, we came in and said, look, y'all teachers, we teachers. We're not telling y'all nothing. Let's workshop this. And what we found is that first wave, it was a lot of white dudes. Why? Because they give these white dudes, a lot of coaches, they get them the social studies class.
Department chairs and yeah.
Oh my God, Sharif. Sister Terry, what was Terry's last name? She was the roster chair at William Penn. Cassandra used to bring her in, because Cassandra's job at the school district, one of them was calling all the roster chairs together. And that's when I found out how a roster chair can destroy your life. I would come in the meeting and it would be all the roster chairs from all the high schools in Philly, almost all of them white men, Terry, who was a black woman, Cassandra, who was a black woman, and me. And I would watch them two sisters run them white dudes like they was in the Olympics. And I would just, because they couldn't tell them. and that's how I watched how, with a point of a finger, a roster chair can send your ass to hell with a anyway. So I set out to say that we had the team. When we began to workshop, we said, we're going to fix this curriculum so it doesn't matter what textbook they bought and put in your head. We came up with 6 questions. I won't talk about it anymore, but these are the 6 questions we developed in our curriculum. If you ask these 6 questions, you can apply these questions to any text. And most of the time you'll find the text they give you can't answer the questions. And we want you to connect what you know to what you don't know. We thought we had this thing figured out. And then what we said was, this is the last thing I say, what we said was, when we finished this work, and we worked probably from 2007, continued to workshop stuff through my first years at Howard, like 2002, 3. What we realized and knew was, as soon as we stop, they'll wait and then act like this never happened. Because the first thing we wrote about was all the curriculum they had treated that way over the 40 years of this struggle. So, and here we are talking about it as if it never happened.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question about that then, because the way that I frame this discussion about Black History Month is that it is not a source of power. If we are going to talk about where the power is, and I were to ask you all as educators, if we drill down, what I just heard you say led me to think, okay, well, then there's real power in doing like a national curriculum audit.
Oh, no,
right?
Do that.
Right?
Do that, man.
And I feel like if you had a national council doing a national curriculum audit on the lives and history of African peoples in America, then that feels more powerful than, again, talking about how George Washington Carver used a peanut to create spaceships. It's like,
when you say audit, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm piggybacking off of the process I just heard you go through, right? Curriculum to me seems like to be, in the story you just told, the source of power. Like the place where power lies.
Instruction, like Sharif.
Curriculum, instruction.
Close your door. And we wanted to get we wanted to get questions on the state test and ultimately talk to the people in Princeton and figure out how we could get them on the SAT, because we know that assessment drives instruction. So we knew that no matter what curriculum we had, these kids, and we was aiming at the AP. We wanted ultimately an AP version, and then you connect with the colleges. If it's on the test, they're likely to have to study it. But when you say audit, what I'm thinking about is, first of all, they've got a great hustle going on right now in that regard. Many of the major school districts, many of these private companies, we're look. But see, it's what Jake Cruz used to call intellectual warfare. The thing for me that would be very interesting, I say for me, let me throw that aside. Well, I'll say what we did. What we did in Philadelphia, before we wrote a line, we went down to 21st Street into what they used to call the pedagogical library, which no longer exists, of course, because they made the damn building into condos. We were doing this right as they colonized education in Philadelphia. Wow. They threw the pedagogical library in the trash. I know. Wow. I got some of the books. I was going down there, and they was like, I said, what y'all doing with these books? We're going to move them over to the new building, right? It's when Paul Vallis sold the damn school district. And John Street and them was the mayor. Let's just name the damn names. At any rate, they was like, nah, we throwing all this in the dumpster. So I would go out in the dumpster. Me and Dana's taking this stuff out. And what we found was almost 40 years of curriculum stuff, among everything else. Why do I say that? And in terms of an audit, when I tell you Detroit, LA, New York, Cleveland, when I tell you that there are parallel curriculum written like that, Sharif, no, you know yourself that Minneapolis, St. Paul, you think them people in the Rondo district who were in the segregated schools who were the ones Woodson was writing to because they were teaching that stuff. That's who Woodson's talking about in 50. He's not talking to integrated schools. He's talking to the segregated schools where they absolutely when you see, what's the sister's name? Of course, we know Rosa Parks. Then people say Black History Month. Did you know that Claudette Colvin was arrested in Montgomery? Okay. When you read what Claudette Colvin says, and she's still alive in the Bronx. Claudette Colvin said that day they snatched me off that bus in Montgomery. She literally says this. She says, I felt like I had Sojourner Truth's hand on one of my shoulders and Harriet Tubman's on the others, holding me down in the seat. And you're saying to yourself, this is a lady in her 80s, rewriting history. But you know what she adds? She says, because we had just spent a unit talking about freedom fighters in my class in Montgomery, and she names the Black teacher. This is the point. They were teaching this stuff. Last thing I say, Chris, the audit I want to see is go find all them curriculum and all those great master teachers. And when Ford and Mellon and Social Sciences Research Council in collaboration with 2 Negroes at Harvard and 1 from Princeton decide we'd like to go to hell. We have audited all of the curriculum we already done. We don't need your help. I promise to God, this is the thing that I want to fight. This is intellectual warfare. F these Negroes. I don't want to see another damn 1619 project, 400 souls. Go to hell. Go get that 150 years.
Now you done rang my bell, Dr. Carr. Dr. Carr done rang my bell now because, like, listen, you know, I've been out here by myself talking about the 1619 project, and then a horrible response to it, which was the 1776 project. And Sharif, I couldn't.
It always gets worse.
I could not even get my brother Sharif to join me on this.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on.
I could not get Sharif to join me on this, you know. Yes, Jesus.
Let me tell you something.
Yes,
this
Lord.
The 1619 project, in terms of their aspirational framing of the United States, are the same project.
Yeah,
trust me.
I mean, and my problem with 1619 project was a lot the same with Black History Month. In that, first of all, I saw it as trauma porn, and it's definitely not the last story I want to teach my kids about Black history and about the history of Africans in America. It's definitely not the story at all I want to teach my kids about Africans in America at all. So we weren't the audience, and I just want to drill down on this because people disagree to this moment. I'm going to keep saying it. When Ebony magazine in the late 60s, early 70s did Lerone Bennett's series on Before the Mayflower. It was a Black publication with a Black audience pulling together Black scholarship from Black scholars for the purpose of Black people to understand Black history. When the 1619 Project came along, it was a white multinational corporation who sold us our own story. We were not the intended audience. White folks were the intended audience. And it was a story that had stripped away most of our strategies for success and replaced them with porn, trauma porn stories of how bad we had it. And I trust no history project about Black people that doesn't have Shaka Zulu in it, does not have pre-Nubian empires in it, doesn't have the libraries of Mali in it and Timbuktu. These are things that give me red flags right away with whatever. If you start my history on the day that a handful of Africans got off of a boat in the United States, we already have a problem, right? And it's not a problem you can easily overcome by all the marketing in the world. I don't care if Janelle Monáe does a commercial for your project on the shores with water behind her and wind blowing and her dress flowing and all that stuff.
The water.
Right. I can't do it, right? No. And the 1776 project is just a much more dangerous variant of that. It's like the opposite, story they're trying to tell. So I want to go back to something though. I'm always trying to locate where's the power in this. Whatever I'm saying, where's the power, right? What I just heard you say, and I would love to hear from you too, Sharif, like curriculum audits aren't enough, but they're a good start. Instruction and who's doing the instruction is another piece, but it's not the end of the story either. An assessment. So I'm thinking, as a layperson who's not in classrooms, not doing this every day, if we did a national audit and in something on instruction and assessment, would we have covered our bases about something that would be systemic and powerful?
Listen, I think the curriculum audit is integral. I think teaching, I go back to we talk about who's leading the classroom, which is really important. Like what's their mindset, what's their skill, what's their will to support Black liberation through their instructional decisions and so forth. But I'm even more concerned. We're just as concerned as who's teaching the teachers. Right. And so, while we look at the 3 million teachers in public schools, with the majority of students of color and significantly the ones who are finding the least sense of belongingness are, those Black students. Who trained them? Who taught them? What's their intellectual genealogy of the educators, the principals, the school leaders, the school board, whoever, the coaches, all of that? Where do they trace it? And so when I think about this curriculum audit, also can't help but to think of what, one, like the significance of like the M Street School in Black history, right? Where AJC, if y'all have not seen Anshere Hines' video about AJC, check it out. But, she was there and she invited W.B. Du Bois to come in and do the professional development at that school for their teachers, right? Yeah. So like, who's coming in? Like, do you got somebody like, oh, well, I wrote a book and this is what I'm coming from whatever tower, ebony or ivory tower, and I'm coming down and now I'm doing it. Or is it somebody that actually has done the research, that understands the people that they're trying to connect with? And I also think about Carter G. Woodson. He was leading professional development. Again, he had ties to the M Street School. Yes. Right. So we got AJC, we got W.B. Du Bois, we got Carter G. Woodson. We talk a lot about Black institutions, the M Street School. Like, where's our M Street schools today? Right. And how do we replicate them over and over and over again? But he would provide professional development for these Black teachers. And again, one of the things that they talk about was he did it independent of the school district. It wasn't a part of it. It was adjacent to, and that they weren't relying on any overarching body of influence or governance to do the work of Black liberation. That piece, I think, is just absolutely crucial. Just like we talk about detox centers for students, we need detox centers for educators so we can refine and expand their intellectual genealogy. That's the work.
Yeah. I mean, so see, now I feel like a little vindicated again, because
let me clarify, because you said something about the six. Let me clarify my stance on 1619. Okay, I think that one, I agree. Like, you can't start. I was a social studies teacher for 8th grade. I could not start teaching history without talking about classical Africa. And I would tell you what Baba Changa, my favorite teacher, would say. It's like, as soon as someone talks about classical music, art, whatever, you better ask them what part of Africa are they referring to, right? Because that was our, the vantage point, classics of your people, right? And I'm talking about as a first grader. This is how they're teaching us. Classic, you'll hear classic this. Your reference is Africa, and what part of it are we talking about? what I believe about 1619, I think one of the biggest problems is, one, yes, it starts at that particular point without reference of a body of work. If it was marketed as a chapter of, you know, something that happened in America, like all right, that's a chapter. Referencing it as the history without acknowledging all the things that happened with Black folks beforehand, during and after what was happening. The same way we would teach about World War One. You talk about World War One and Two, most of the conversation about Japan and Europe. What's going on? What were Africans doing at that time? Right? That's not talked about at all, right? But as we talked about, as we taught it, we're like, hey, here's whose voice is missing, whose perspective is missing, and whose experiences are missing, no matter what is going on. And then the last piece is that it was just sent out as, you know, if teachers already have trouble saying they're not ready to teach Black children, right? This is with local studies, national studies. We are not ready to teach Black children. We are not prepared after thousands of dollars in teacher college, after 4 or 5 years in teacher college. We are not ready to teach your children, Black people. And then we just take something and throw something else at them like that, that wasn't vetted. It wasn't, connected to anything. Then you have unprepared teachers with negative mindsets about Black children and the people that send them to the school. And now they just have this. My concern is, like, what does it reference? But as far as like essays, yeah, I've pulled essays and I'm like, wow, this is well written, but I'm understanding that it is a sliver in the global picture of the African people.
It's so thematic first of all, let me just say this. A lot of these histories I approach with the question, if this were the last thing ever read about my people, is this what I would want it to be? Right. So if you had one shot at getting white America to understand Black America, would the 1619 Project achieve what you were attempting to teach them? That's a first, I think, kind of powerful question to ask when you read that stuff. Not, is it good writing, or is it poetic, or is it lyrical, or does it sound good? But if you had a shot for a multinational corporation to educate white folks completely about Black folks, is this a project that you would hand them? I answer that question in the negative. I can't speak for anyone else, but I answered no. That's one thing. The other thing that I would say about it too is you too, as educators, have just laid out a bigger problem, which is, I was on a school board. This is not how we adopted curriculum. We didn't have individual teachers pulling stuff down from a website and taking it into classrooms ill prepared, especially in a district where we knew that a good percentage, maybe 60 to 70% of our teachers were struggling with teaching Black students in the first place, right? The whole Pinterest nation thing, yes, where teachers go on to Pinterest and pull down lesson plans and I'm struggling with the Black kids in my classroom, so I'm going to find some talisman online. and on Monday I'm going to understand. I'm going to be like, I've said it a million times, like that scene in Airplane, the movie in the 70s, where the woman steps up and says, the white woman steps up to talk to the two Black dudes, and she says, I got this, I speak jive, right? And she starts talking to them in jive or whatnot. We went through Ruby Payne, which was a very dangerous training of Black teachers for years, that went on for years. Ruby Payne made millions upon millions of dollars teaching white teachers what they needed to know to teach Black students. And it was a hundreds of $1 million enterprise, right? We've now had courageous conversations that I might look at those a little different, but that's another contract that districts have done in the millions of dollars. Some school districts have a $1, $2, $3 million contract to do courageous conversations that, number one, oftentimes aren't courageous. And number two, they're not courageous, and they oftentimes don't end up with your teachers knowing anything more than they needed to know about teaching our students. So when I think about these history projects, I'm like thinking, man, this is like an operating system. You're a computer. I'm going to plug in an operating system. This is the wrong operating system for an educator. The 1776 project, the 1619 project. Black History Month, the pulling down of the same 5 or 6 Black heroes for kids to write reports about every year. I don't see any power in it. That's my problem. I don't see the power. I don't see where power is being built in that.
I mean, for me, 2 quick things I would love to hear Dr. Carr. So I think, one, the framing of the question of what white people need to learn about Black people. For me, the framing question is what white people need to learn about whiteness. I don't know if I need them to learn about me. I think they need to learn about their whiteness, what led them to believe in white supremacy, what led them to implement white supremacy as a policy that turned into white savagery around the world. That to me is their fundamental work, for not just for them, but the world, to understand like what this did to the global society of human beings, what it does to the earth as a livable, sustainable planet when we choose to, right? And then the other thing is, I think, and it goes back to this intellectual genealogy idea, is teachers are always going to pull in supplemental material. Like, so even as a school board, if you didn't necessarily as a board endorse that, it was happening. And the number one thing that people pull from is how they were taught, what they were taught, and what their mindsets are. So they're always downloading. So if they have that biases, racial biases, anti-Blackness, no matter what the curriculum is in front of them, that's going to betray any positive curriculum that you have. And so I think so much of the work goes back to who's leading the classroom and who's leading those who led the classroom and who trained them and taught them.
I agree. I agree. In fact, as a project, and you opened with this framing question, Barbara, Chris, when you ask that where the power lies and what the objectives are, I think if the objective of the 1619 project was, and I believe it was, principally this, to educate white people. And I think that there was a correlate objective in that, maybe even commingled with that primary objective that you've raised, Bob L. Mackey, and that is to interrogate whiteness. I don't question the motives of Nicole Hannah-Jones or Wesley Morris or Khalil Muhammad or any of the people who participated in the 1619 project, some of whom I know better than others, most of whom I know, and even if in passing. I don't question their motives. Or Jake Silverstein, the editor of the New York Times Magazine, who I met when we had a symposium on the 1619 project down at the Museum of African American History and Culture, and I participated in that. I don't question that motive. That's not my motive. And so, if they want to fight that fight, if they want to fight that fight, and it is more comfortable because you get a better salary. Yes, you're always in danger of getting put out the house because, white folks don't like, so go ahead and fight that fight. My problem, as you say, Chris, is when you carpet bomb the schools with it. Because I remember when we were at the school district, remember when Skip Gates was around with Bill Gates peddling that Encyclopedia Africana BS? And I have all 5 volumes of the second edition. The first one was a 1 volume, but it was preceded by a CD-ROM. And he would come, and I remember when he came to Philly with that bullshit. Oh, excuse me. No, because I had to watch myself.
It's fine. Chris curses on this show all the time. Go ahead, you're good.
No, but what I'm trying, I have to balance in my head all the various conversations over the years that I've been a part of, and that I know many others have, including both of y'all. When we were doing, for example, when we were starting Philadelphia Freedom Schools, 1999, 2000, the school district of Philadelphia was rewriting its curriculum. The curriculum director, the vice superintendent, was a sister named Kay Lovelace. Kay had come from Detroit, where they fought the African-centered wars. I went to the funeral of Kwame Kenyatta in the Charles Wright Museum, where, we talk about, Detroit was one of the leaders in these African-centered school movements. And of course, Baba Sharif, you learned that lesson in African-centered schools about what classical meant. And I remember being in meetings at the school district where the white was coming in, we're going to do this English curriculum, we're going to redo the curriculum. And so we'll put in Beloved, we'll put in Invisible Man. I said, no. And I went to the board. We literally had one of them chalkboard. I said, okay, what's the oldest piece you teach? Is it Iliad? Is it the Odyssey? Is it Sir Gawain and the Green Knight? Is the Canterbury Tales? Put it up here. Okay, so then I drew a line, and that's on the other side. What are they doing in China? What are they doing in Native America? What are they doing in Africa? That's where we start. You don't put us in as a pair of earrings on a body that you already created. Wow. Here's Sundiata, here's Ptahotep, and I said, so you got the Iliad and the Odyssey? You don't even come in first. When you start going through it, saying I saw that, they can't deal with that. If you want to argue with white folks over what they know and what they don't know, then write a 1619 project. But that's not their objective. And I'm not talking about the writers. Finance capital, monopoly capitalism, looking to educate a new labor force. Their objective is to make people a little bit more comfortable with the Negro and to make the Negro feel like they're American. So what do? just like they tried with the Encyclopedia Africana and the CD-ROM that failed, just like they tried with new standards. Everybody talking about Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter. Oh, she's so courageous to talk about not being with Trump. Yeah, look at her mama, Lynn Cheney, when she was over the NEA back in the 90s, where she said, I reject this curriculum because you mentioned Harriet Tubman 5 times and you only mentioned Abraham Lincoln once. Or go back before that. Remember Arthur Schlesinger, The Disuniting of America? Federal Express paid for the publication of that, and they carpet bombed the entire country. And they had a hit list of Leonard Jeffries, Milana Karenga, Jacob Carruthers, Asa Hilliard, had their pictures in there saying avoid it, because that's when they had the Portland baseline essays, the Detroit essays. Kansas City was moving on this African Senate front. I'm just going back to say that we've seen this 19 project before. What we have to do is return to the objectives we were always clear on. We educate our children. And if you want to say something, you tell us how much of our tax money we got to come here and cut your throat to get back to educate our children. You're not giving us anything, and keep that damn curriculum out of my teachers' electronic inboxes. We do not need it.
So on this is exactly, you've just gotten to the heart of the thing that I care most about, which is honestly these ceremonial, unserious approaches to education and Black history and knowledge, Black knowledge, are unserious, and they're everywhere, and they do carpet bomb our schools and our minds. They're part of the commercials that we watch. They're part of the mass media that we take in. They're part of the gross, large scale narratives that we suck down and believe. So the power is in reconfiguring the operating system, the curriculum, the inputs, what goes in, and garbage in, garbage out. So we need to put something better into the minds. And everything you just said to me made me think, why are we not meditating on that 365 days a year as parents, educators, community members, community leaders, whatnot, so that we are serious, right? Because right now I feel like we're unserious, rather than dealing in representational power, product placement, Black history, right? Like why are we not holding our Black intellectuals to account? Why are we not being serious about reconfiguring the Black mind? Because the Black mind has had 400 years of damage. It's been intoxicated with all the wrong intoxicants. If we were serious, everything you just said would have been a 365 lesson plan for us as a cohesive community, rather than trading in these ritualistic, ceremonial, surfacey, unserious things that make us adjust to our oppression rather than continuously meditate on how to beat it.
Why do we even consult with them though? I mean, again, I just want to return. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned him. I keep all of Rome Bennett Jr.'s books in one part around the corner right there on my shelf. In fact, I had this one down the other day, The Challenge of Blackness, Rome Bennett Jr., right? We're saying this, and of course, and I told Jake Silverstein, this editor of New York Times Magazine, the guy who, I said, if you look at any 10-year stretch from the early 60s through the early, or any year stretch from the early 60s to the early 70s of Ebony Magazine, you're going to find material that's better than anything was written in that 1619 project. Superior.
So I'm glad you just said that. Oh, Lord Jesus, thank you so much for just saying that, because this is what
Stansberry,
right? I said it to some high up people at the New York Times. If you were honest and serious, you would have done this as a joint project with Ebony.
Oh no, brother.
Well, you should have like they have the archives and they have the research. You should have actually done this with a Black publication with Black scholars for a Black audience.
That's not the objective. The objective is for the New York Times to be the gold standard. You got Negroes around here still mad about Golden Globes and Academy Awards. The objective is to get you to come back to the big house. Do not walk off this plantation. So my thing is, I don't want to get into an argument with the Black folk writing for the 1619 project. I don't want to get into an argument with Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine, who were the editors of this new 400 Souls thing. I'm not arguing with them. What did Jay-Z say? I'm not looking at you dudes. I'm looking past you. In other words, the whole point is you can't, I don't care who white people prop up and say those are your leaders. All we have to do is remember that we pick. And by we, it's the people that convene. When you say that, Chris,
Coochie chocolate.
no question. We don't need. Listen,
that's a good point, though. This is I don't want to lose this point.
Yeah,
I was only saying it in that if you are going to do it anyways and put all this money behind it, you need to live by the thing I learned about theology in my theology classes is you judge a religion by its own universal values. You don't judge it by, like, you don't judge Islam by Christian values, right? You judge Islam by its own. Are you living up within your own religion?
Yeah.
So within the diversity religion of gross commercialism or whatnot that they like to preach, diversity and inclusion and all that. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're going to do this project, then you have to live up to your own religion and values, which is you're going to need a Black partner. And oh, by the way, meanwhile, we've been defunding and showing disinterest as Black people in traditional publications like the Johnson publications, who have archives. They have so much of our information. Well, there should be no
archives. They sold them.
They still have some of them. They sold a lot of the pictures, but they still have a lot of the intellectual property, like Lerone Bennett Jr.'s work, right? That they did.
That's truly unfortunate because somebody watching this will now realize, oh, we need to go buy that, and they'll sell it for a song.
Oh, see, I shouldn't have never said nothing. Anybody watching this right now realize I didn't say it.
You don't have, but don't worry about. I mean, no, but what you raising though is very important. I know we run up against clock, but when you talk about that. That's true. You judge a religion on its internal barometer unless you're a colonizer, at which point you and our obsession with the numbers is part of the trap. So when they say, oh, well, 1619, first of all, it ain't original. Did you read Lerone Bennett? He said before the Mayflower. If you know, you'll know why if you read chapter 1. Mm-hmm. But before that's 1620. Oh, 1619, duh. But anyway. But why are you obsessed with the numbers? 1776, 1619, because this really is a friend. Jacob Carruthers deals with this in 1972 in a little pamphlet he wrote called Science and Oppression. He says what the West does is they create a system of hierarchy with themselves at the top, and they create the illusion that somehow you can get where they are. But the fact is the system is designed for them to maintain being at the top. And if you ever start walking away, they keep in their back pocket a theory of progress. What does that mean? That means that whatever we're doing now is better than what we did 2 years ago, except they never abandoned their genealogy, to bring up Sharif's point. So while they keep talking founding fathers, you keep remixing yourself. So you think that a poet in a yellow coat at the inauguration speaking a poem at the Super Bowl is progress, when in fact, they ain't gonna hire nobody that was gonna foment a slave rebellion, and the NFL remains unchanged. This is the game. If they keep you facing forward, then this curriculum got to be better than the one they were doing in the 30s. Why? Because it's newer, but they never displaced the assumptions of their curriculum. And so when you say Woodson was doing the equivalent of professional development at both Dunbar, M Street, and at Armstrong across the street, where he ended up being the principal, we only bring up his name now to introduce, as you say, the next project. And if you went back to Dunbar, and it's funny you say that, because let me reach across here. Look, I keep this. See what that is? That's the Dunbar graduation watch from 1941.
Oh, wow.
A lot of
wow.
Yeah, Apple, take that. Apple.
look, and then look, this is a woman's watch. I found this. I don't wear it, but I will wear this every day. Before I paid Apple 6 pennies for a red, black. The whole concept of red, black, and green. The only way Apple can do that is if we have a theory of progress that West has put on us to say this is an advancement, and forget about the fact that the actual colors and the concept is about not giving Apple a dime. But that only works when you have amnesia. Our curriculum has to recover our memory. If we recover our memory, then we get out of these young people's way. That's why I don't get down with the Afrofuturism stuff too much. You Negroes is making up a future without ever. You know what I'm saying? This is the work of children. You know what I'm saying? I can see it using the first grade.
Now, this would be, and we are running up against time. What you just landed on there was something that I was trying to flesh out, and I didn't get there. Which was saying I don't mind a recurring culling of Black history every year in February, if it is if it's giving us cues of what we should do next.
Yes.
Like if we are building a Black future of freedom, like we can see a freedom future.
Yes.
Right. But the way to get there is by culling our heritage for the best of its strategies. It's plans. It's because there's intelligence in that's the part that's missing from we tell stories, but we don't talk about intelligence, right? We don't talk about the intelligence that our folks were using. So the Black Future thing, I just want to say the Afrofuturists and that all that is part of it, but you kind of just burst my bubble a little bit on it.
Oh, no, I got all that Afrofuturist stuff. I'm down with it, but I'm just amazed at how y'all forgot Sun Ra.
That's Sun Ra.
Y'all forgot what's my man studying in the 19th century Imperium and Imperio. Do you know how long we've been doing? Y'all forgot. You know how long Afrofuturism? You know what I'm saying? This ain't new.
No. Okay. And we're going to end on this. I'm going to get your guys' final word on this, but I do want to say this. The Sun Ra is a great example of if you don't know your own history, you don't know that you're missing a lot. But this is kind of the point for Black History Month for me. It is not it's not something we build on. It's like Groundhog Day. We do it every year the same way and the same thing. So year to year, we're not making progress in our intellectual understanding. We're just living Groundhog Day every year in February. And Sharif and I have talked about this on the show before in terms of there are people now who know George Floyd's name, but don't know Rodney King's name. They don't know Tyrell Nelson's name. They don't know the story of Fred Hampton, right? But they have done Black History Month ritualistically every year their entire lifetime, right? So how is it that you did not know about Tyrell Nelson and you did not know about Rodney King and you did not know about, which wasn't that long ago. If you don't know Rodney King, let's just put it this way. That's not that long ago, first of all. Number one, if you're acting like George Floyd was your first time understanding all of these type of issues and whatnot, you're stuck in a time loop. And we're doing that over and over again with our children. We're doing that with them. They're not making intellectual progress if we keep doing this Groundhog Day. So anyways, I'll give you two brothers the final word on, is Black History Month still relevant? And I had even a deeper question there across the screen. Is it time to end Black History Month? And Sharif, I think I'll start with you.
All right. First of all, and it's actually infuriating and scary that a lot of people I've heard over and over again, oh, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor was like, now I understand now, like, you know what I mean? Like that's not willful negligence. That is just outright, violence that you said like, oh, I've ignored it up until I can't look away anymore kind of thing. Right. So I think, I'm a quote, Dr. Woodson, one of the things he said was, some teachers and their students have misunderstood the celebration of Negro History Week. Some schools work up enthusiasm during these few days, stage a popular play, present an orator of the day, or render exercises of a literary order, but they forget the Negro thereafter throughout the year. To proceed in such fashion may do us much harm as good. And I think if he was around today, he would cross out the may and say emphatically, that is more harmful than good. I think, and I forget exactly how Baba Carr stated. I hope he says it again, talking about the power of memory or something like that. But to me, it's this ongoing Sankofa moment. Like, will we use that as a philosophical and strategic framework to ensure that we are not living Groundhog Day, that we are continuing to build? We can't say phrases like, oh, I stand on my shoulders of my giants and everybody's talking about their ancestors and they ain't looking at a single thing their ancestor did. They just want to talk about the idea of an ancestor, the idea of somebody that had accomplished something, but not looking and not at all interested in the Black blueprint. When you talk about standing on the shoulder, that means you're committing to building from the Black blueprint that has existed before 1776, before 1619, and using it as the way of action. That is what the commitment is to, and I think about, y'all talk about like Ebony, and I remember as a child, Ebony and Jet was always in, like there was always like books and everything, but there were certain magazines that was also around. So now I was just wondering, like, I haven't seen, at least as an adult, I haven't had an Ebony. I haven't even seen an Ebony in a long time. And so then I was also wondering, like, what is, I would read Susan Taylor's quote sometimes in Essence, but, or her column. But I also wonder, like, what are the magazines now, like Negro of the Journal of Negro Life that Dr. Woodson started with his own money, right, from his teacher salary, and he started this, this journal. Like, what I would love for Dr. Carr to also talk about what's the journal today, and then shout out to the curriculum writers and wherever they are, let's bring them back to the forefront. I'm so excited. At the center, our team is writing curriculum for juniors and seniors in high school, 2-year sequential curriculum for those who are aspiring to be educational activists, and pulling from our Black blueprint, our heroes, and where it's a 2-year sequence, not a month unit. It is about 25 units. So that will last 2 years for high school students. And so I'm excited about that. And then lastly, this collaboration around in February, when we are truly, just the Blackest, and it's a launch pad, a benchmark, a pause in, and accounting, an accountability system of highlighting Black educators on Philly 7th Ward in partnership with the center. So excited about this and looking forward to, continuing this dialogue way beyond the 28th of this month.
Dr. Carr.
No, thank you, Bob Chris, and thank you, Bob Sharif. I'm sitting here scribbling notes, but I know I'm going to have to go back and review, as I do often, these Freedom Fridays in particular, but the recording, and I'm grateful for that, because it not only reinvigorates me, it gives me more hope. The issues that you raise, Bob Sharif, you really laid out what we have to do. Our power in many ways is in our momentum, is in the archive of memory. When we remember what we've done, as you said, Chris, you can take what we have done well, replicate it, adjust it to contemporary times, and the farther back we go, the better we have. So to your first question, is it time to end Black History Month? I don't think so. It's time to restore it to the mission it had initially. And that's that Sankofa moment you mentioned. As you were talking, Bob, I rushed and got, this is the February 1976 issue of the Negro History Bulletin. So that's the 60th anniversary of ASALH, Association of Studying Afro-American Life and History. They still publish Negro History Bulletin. It's now the African-American History Bulletin. It's not what it was. They still publish the Journal of Negro History, and Journal of African-American History. A lot of good work in there. Ebony and Jet no longer publish. Ebony maintains a website. Jet no longer exists. Ebony doesn't have a print edition. Essence, of course, ended up being bought out and reconfigured, so they still on the screen. But all of the publications like that, popular publications, particularly ones that are white owned now and Black facing, Black marketed, Black targeted, are vastly inferior to the ones that we had. And I think about that in closing for two reasons. One, this is the issue where they explain how the thing went from a week to a month. Thelma Perry, who was the editor of the bulletin at the time, notes that they expanded the week to Black History Month because the work kept getting larger. And a lot of people don't know this as well. Of course, Woodson, we know, picked Negro History Week, second week of February, to coincide with the birthdays of Lincoln and Douglas. Douglas picked his birthday to be the 14th because he said, they don't know the exact day, but my mother always called me her Valentine. So I picked the 14th. That's how Douglas ended up with the 14th. But here, a lot of people don't know. Dr. Perry says, as originally conceived by the founder Carter Woodson, the observance would be held in whatever week included the birthdays of the late Black leader Freddie Douglass and Civil War President Abraham Lincoln. When both birthdays could not be included within a single week, the Douglas birthday would be chosen. Let's linger on that. This was never about educating white people about us. This was always about educating our people. And so we'll close with the brother you evoked, who has a speech that he gave that anniversary year, 60th anniversary in Atlanta at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. I hope you can see him. Your friend and ours, the great Lerone Bennett Jr. This is what Lerone Bennett said. He said that, what did he say? He says, there's a powerlessness of Black intellectuals who are, by virtue of their powerlessness, unable to create or sustain institutional mechanisms for mediating between generations and transmitting the accumulated lore of the past. We have made great progress in, he says, we have made great progress in this area, primarily because of the work of the association, but it is still true that the media and mechanisms for transmitting Black heritage in schools and communities are controlled by aliens and adversaries who feed on our transcendence and create massive short circuits in the flowing currents between the generations. The solution to this is the wrong minute talking to you. You the one brought him up, Chris. And Sharif and everybody.
Wow.
We now reestablish our institutional power, like the Senate. Baba Sharif is gonna unblock these conversations between generations, and the rest will take care of itself.
Wow. Well, this is so powerful. I do believe we need to replace Black History Month with something more powerful. So that's going to be my final word, which is Stokely Carmichael and others, even Bob Moses, talked about building counter institutions. Why do we need to live in other people's institutions? So if we are not talking about building counter institutions, we should stop talking about institutional racism, for instance. Institutional racism can't be our fetish if we're not willing to back it up with some capital, like some Black capital. Ebony, as people may or may not know, just recently went through bankruptcy and came out of bankruptcy and was bought by a father and daughter team. And we should be interested in how it does from here. And we should be interested in their archives and that they do well. Some of you have subscriptions to everything in the world, but nothing Black. So, so maybe you might want to discover a way to get rid of your Netflix subscription and get an Ebony subscription. Who knows? I mean, I'm just talking out loud here for a minute. I don't know everything, but I do know that where you put your money makes a difference. And if you put your money into the building of Black educational capital, if you invest in things like Sharif's center that he has, if you invest in the means of production of education, how we create teachers, how we create schools, how we capitalize those schools, what goes into those schools, the curriculum, the development, the instruction, how much power do we have over the assessment of the students in those schools? Those are power conversations. Those are the things to me that result in power. I will say this much: if you don't have a household copy of Lerone Bennett's Before the Mayflower and don't have one for your kids or whatnot, hey, again, you got a Hulu subscription. I don't know why you don't have like access to Amazon to get that book to your house quick. Maybe even from a Black bookstore. Right. Yeah, maybe so like, we are push button Negroes in 2021. We can make a lot happen, but for some reason we are commercialized, trivialized, marginalized, kind of on this institutional, like mass media crack that stops us from even doing what we can do at this point. Everybody we talked about in the past in this show today was working with less than what we have. I've said it a million times. Bayard Rustin and a host of people got $250,000 to the March on Washington without Twitter or Facebook or $1,300 cell phones in their pocket or $2,200 laptops that they could pop open and get to millions of people. So maybe we do something different. Maybe we generate more education, less ceremony, less ritual, less retelling of the same stories over and over again. For everybody watching and listening, I'm so proud and happy that we have built a family of people that actually care enough about the Black intellect and the Black mind, about Black educational capital, that you will share your Friday mornings with us. I am extremely grateful that we brought in the big guns today. Oh, no. Dr. Carr brought in Dr. Carr, so y'all can't even mess with us on this Friday. This has been another episode of Freedom Friday. You are still not free, but hopefully you are freer now than you were when we started this hour of discussion. We will see you next week when we will have another fire